Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it is both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of giving you specific takeaway, providing inspiration, all in the hopes that you and your journey can be at least a little bit easier. Now, before I fully dive into things, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, let's talk about the duality of life. Now, this is not a new subject for me, but I want to talk about it in a new context, perhaps. And what I mean by the duality of life, if you haven't checked out other episodes about this, is that multiple things are happening all at once. You know, some good, some bad, to varying degrees, some both good and bad, all at the same time as like the actual thing, right? So life is very strange in that way. Some of it can be related, some of it's coincidental, and so forth, right? But one of the reasons why I'm a big advocate of mastering mental fortitude, as is the title of my nonfiction book, is because, you know, that's life. And as artists, if we're to succeed in anything, we have to be able to navigate all of these things as they come. You know, last week I talked about this idea that there are people in life that seemingly make everything look easy, but that doesn't mean that life isn't difficult for them. It's just they know how to deal with that stuff. And so for me, you know, that's kind of what last week and, you know, now heading into this week really is all about, is really examining the duality of life, the things that are both good and you get to celebrate, but also the things that are, you know, not so great. And, you know, of course, that also applies to the wider scope of life, right? But I'm going to specifically talk about it for me and what that means. But, you know, certainly you can look at amazing, beautiful things in the world, and sometimes we have a negative bias and just see the negative stuff. I think it's important to see the good stuff. There's a lot of beautiful, amazing things happening in the world, and simultaneously there's also really negative things, whether Iran, whether Ukraine, and so forth, right? Just lots of stuff happening all at once. But I want to kind of go into the microcosm and just highlight, you know, my journey, right? So one of the big things was finishing an outline for a trilogy of movies that I'm working on. And I had, you know, a rough outline initially when I began all of this. But now, you know, as time has gone by, I literally wrote, you know, a very detailed, like 16-page, almost beat by beat, if you will, version of what, you know, movie number one of this trilogy would be. You know, a lot of puzzle pieces are starting to fit together, right? Still a lot missing, but at least, you know, I can start to see the picture in my mind's eye, to the point that, you know, my collaborators, I emailed them and was like, hey, I feel good that it's at a point where, you know, your feedback would be valuable. So let's, you know, schedule a time and let's talk about this. Let's figure out, you know, what works, what doesn't work, what you still have questions on, what you think can be enhanced, yada, 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 right? And so, you know, that's where we're in the process of scheduling. And I think it'll happen this weekend, and I'm excited for it. I think, you know, it's one of those things, I'm a big advocate for at least myself, but other people as well. I think it works. It's getting that feedback, you know. There's just something to be able to, you know, have a sounding board for some of your stuff. And like a lot of times when I have meetings with people after they read my stuff, they'll just ask me questions. And the idea that I have to come up with an answer or justify something is good because it forces me to think in a way that I'm perhaps wasn't forced to before, right? It gets me to expand on those things. It's no different than when I have a belief and me and my friend, for example, Ian Kaiser, we talk and, he'll ask questions or poke holes at it. It forces me to, grow the idea to a stronger point by doing more research, coming up with more arguments, or ultimately gets me to change my mind, right? That's the beautiful part about all of it. And so this is part of the process, and I'm excited for it. I think it really came together very nicely. One of the things that people underestimate is that the ability to just sit down and write can yield really good results, right? And it really was a matter of that, just finding the time and just sitting down and doing it. And last week, at the start of it, I was really able to dedicate, pockets of good, solid time to this. And, because people think, oh, when I'm inspired, I'll write. And it's like the quality of your work really, it doesn't change whether you're inspired or not. Like, it really doesn't. And I'm not the only person to say this. Certainly successful authors, storytellers are on the record of discussing similar ideas. That it's all about just sitting down and writing. The inspiration will come, in that way. So it was great to have that. And yeah, I'm really proud of myself for putting together the skeleton of what I really believe. Now, the interesting part is through this, the second act, as they call it, like if you're familiar with storytelling, the second act is the middle chunk of everything. It's once kind of the story gets going and before the ending, right? It takes up, like if it's a 2-hour movie, it can be like 60 minutes, maybe slightly longer, of the entire movie, right? And so that's a lot of time to fill. And so as part of that, I created certain subplots and started moving stuff that I thought from movie number 2 could play well within movie number 1. And so that's why I kind of laugh, because this idea of a trilogy, it might end up being a duology instead of a trilogy. And that's okay, nothing wrong with that. It's not like I'm commissioned to write a trilogy. It was just my own kind of idea that I thought, like, at the start of this, it would require 3 movies. But if it requires 2, that's okay. So we'll see. The interesting part is, regardless whether it is a duology or a trilogy, is, the ending of movie number 1. Because it is a very much continuation, but you want it to kind of still be a standalone in and of itself. But I think, interestingly enough, like The City We Became, or I think that's what it's called. It's either The City We Became or We Became the City, by N.K. Jemisin. It's a book. And also the Golden Compass, the first book of Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy. Those, I think, equate best to the type of ending that's really required for what I'm going for, where it feels like a complete thing, and yet that it's going to go on, and you're excited to see where it goes on. Like, it's a very fine line to thread, because it has to be satisfactory. Like when you, for example, my favorite movie pretty much is The Matrix, right? And of course that's a trilogy, but as a standalone, in fact, most people just prefer the one movie in which, 2 and 3 and now 4 had never come out. Because it's such a singular entity, right? Like, there's could be more to the story, but it's okay because the journey of that movie was about Neo discovering his own true self, right? And the powers that come with it, and belief and so forth. So that's a very complete idea. the idea of his dark materials, I won't spoil it, but it ends on this note where, the main character gets to a point that they've been trying to reach, and, beyond it is this mysterious thing. And so it's like that, one aspect of the journey is complete, but there's a very large unknown left to it. And I think that movie, or that a TV show, because it is an HBO TV show, I think really did a good job, but that's because the source material was really well done. And so, a big part of whenever an ending doesn't work is because your inciting incident needs to be reworked. And I've definitely been, that's one aspect of everything that I've been really focusing on and making sure that is strong. And, now I truly believe that overall, the story is really solid. Again, a couple things that just by the nature of the outline, could leave for some question marks, but overall, in terms of where I know how it needs to go, it works. I say that, and we'll find out, this weekend how wrong I could be. But I really think it's more of like finessing the ending and knowing that the exact way it needs to end. And I know overall how it needs to end, but now it's about really, really fine-tuning the details. And by knowing that will also help to clean sweep, what came before it, because I know what I'm trying to get to. So that's kind of, where I'm at with all of it, if you will. The other amazing opportunity that we're now working towards is me and a few of my friends are going to be on a panel at LA Comic-Con, and we're going to be teaching essentially filmmaking, right? How to make a feature film and how to make an indie feature film without sacrificing your ambition, right? That's what we're aiming to do. So we're a panel of 6. We had a great meeting on Friday to discuss, okay, how do we want to structure this? How do we want to go about this? Just basically all the logistics. And that was a really good meeting, and I'm excited for us. We also got our time slot, so we are December 3rd, which is a Saturday at noon in room 405. So, if you're planning on attending LA Comic-Con, please join us. It'll be fun to have you, and I think we'll really deliver. All of us are excited to make sure that it is a very engaging and useful discussion, right? So I'm very much looking forward to that. So that's been amazing. And then another thing that kind of out of the blue came up was my latest film, A Bogota Trip, is part of, we got accepted into another film festival, the Silicon Valley International Film Festival, which is in December, let's say mid-December. More details on that in future episodes. But as part of that, there's an ability to pitch to tech entrepreneurs who love investing in film. And so I'm like, okay, obviously I have a project that I could pitch. I've been, for the past couple of weeks, working on a 90-second pitch, because I was slated to do a pitch festival through my college, Emerson College. They do a pitch festival every year where 7 students and 7 alumni, present projects, whether it be film, TV, so forth. And so, I've been working on that. So I have a little bit of basis, and, now I just finished the outline. So there's that. Obviously, I don't think in theory I could crank out a script, but I don't think it's needed. I think the time is better spent on other things, right? So, such as a pitch deck, also creating the website for the crowdfund, because that's kind of also, as part of this, they really recommend having, a place where people can actually invest money into. And for me, I always wanted to do this as an NFT project because I like the NFT, not as a currency, but as a utility. The idea that you're essentially investing stake into a film project and, you're essentially shareholders. However, all of this is defined by the filmmakers, how it all works, but that's the basic idea that, essentially anyone who donates money now owns a stake in the film, and they can, sell their shares and whatever else, right? Buy more, it doesn't matter. It's literally like you're trading it like you would a stock. And there's just something that I love about that for the simple reason that there's a financial incentive, right? Unlike with regular crowdfunds of like, okay, I'll sign your script or whatever. No, you actually do, as an investor, stand to benefit beyond just a love of the art. And that to me is exciting, plus the inherent nature of its marketability, because when there's a financial incentive for the people who own stock in it, then, they'll want to help make this movie as big as it can be, at least in theory, right? And so that excites me, that sort of natural engine of promotion intertwined with this. And so, I'm working closely with my friend AJ Jolivet. I wanted to do an NFT project that was like a short film to start off, and I'm still working on that. But now, given this opportunity, things are accelerated towards this, and that's going to be put a little bit on the back burner. So, right now I'm putting together the pitch deck. Right now it's all about coming up with the text, and then, this graphic designer Armani that I work with, she'll put the visual flair to it, and all the while working with AJ to create, okay, how do we want this crowdfund to be structured, and I have to come up with the text for that as well, and yada, 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 right? So there's a lot of things, and, that's all very exciting, right? You want to get to the place where these opportunities are coming your way, but it's kind of, when I talk about like both the good and the bad of just a singular entity, this is the both good and the bad of it, because it's like, it's all very exciting. You want to be in this position, but it's like now you got less than a month to put all this stuff together, when you've already got so many other things going on. But it's like, it's a worthwhile opportunity, and, you go for it. These are the positions you want to be in. And the irony is, when they do come, you essentially have to dig in your heels even harder and work, 3 times as much, even though you already thought, you were working twice as hard. Now you got to go 3 times as hard. So, yeah, sometimes that's just kind of what it takes. And, you have to really embrace it. And, we'll see how it all turns out. All I can do is put my best foot forward. All I can do is ultimately try. It gives me something to aim for. I'm sure, like in the crux of this, like with the pitch deck, right? It would be amazing. And I've started this process, right? Where we're creating the character sketches of the main characters, because I want to visualize them for myself in order to write the story better, right? If I can see them, then I can know how they act and yada, 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 right? And it would be amazing for the pitch deck to be able to lay out each of those characters, from a visual standpoint with their name and so forth. Well, I don't think that's going to happen, at least, not fully rendered and so forth. So it's like, okay, what's the minimal viable product that we can deliver? Okay, can we do some hand-drawn sketches, just to show at least, an idea of what it's going to be, and then pick like key art, if I want to term it as that, of like, let's have the main character, her name is Adia, let's have her be fully realized, and then everyone else will be more just kind of rough sketches and so forth, right? So kind of, picking and choosing these battles, if you will, and just being like, okay, We know it's not going to be as exact as what we would want it to be, because as I said, we are working towards these things. It's just now the deadline has pushed, I was hoping to maybe spring of next year, we would be launching a crowdfund as opposed to, before the year ends. And so, you do the best you can, and you can always update those materials later, but at least for now, you don't want to embarrass yourself, certainly, but you want to have, you want to be able to showcase what it is you got, right? So that's what we're working towards, and we'll see. We'll keep you posted on that. The other thing, so we've talked about sort of the good side, right? Now, let's talk about the negative side of all this. This isn't perhaps as negative, but I talked about the pitch festival that Emerson College does. And it's something that I actually wanted to be really part of. I had submitted. And the thing of it is, even though it's students and alumni, they really are trying to keep it to alumni who are recent graduates, and I am not. And so, in that way, I didn't get to participate. And it's okay overall. For me, it was never about doing it to win or anything like that. It was simply for the experience of, it was a worthwhile experience because it forced me to really hone in on what the story is. And, now it's all coming together because it set me up to be able to have a pitch to be able to deliver for this, for this opportunity. But the downside is, there is a hole left in me of like, what would it have been like to present in front of these people? Now, I guess I'm going to get that opportunity in a major way to do it in front of, these, tech people who want to invest. And by the way, that's another thing why I think the NFT stuff really works. And AJ, who's very much in the space, he's excited for it because, one of the biggest barriers to entry right now of people getting people on board for NFTs is because it's so new and most people don't really know about it. But of course, if you're in the tech space, that it's much more easier for people to adopt because they know about it, right? And so he's excited for this opportunity from that perspective, right? But anyway, where I'm going as far as with the Pitch Fest, it just would have been, it leaves a little bit of a mystery, right? What would have been like for me to have to memorize and present this thing. So, but I can't lament over it. It's done and dusted, as they say, and, now on to the next. And I have a big, big opportunity to do just that. So, time to go at it. The really big thing, in terms of my personal stuff that's, on the negative side of things is my dog Chloe. She's been dealing with health issues, which has been scary. She's quite up there in age, and she's been having kind of seizures. And, it's a very scary thing because you don't know how to react in the moment. And obviously, she's not one that can speak. So you're kind of left to do your best to interpret. And so we've been going to the vets and stuff like that. And so, as of now, essentially it's a minor heart murmur mixed with kind of a brain tumor or the start of a brain tumor. We don't know. We haven't done full scans of that, but they know that's essentially what it is, and so it doesn't change the prescription of things, in terms of the steps to take. And so, she's on medication, and hopefully, that kicks in, and it's meant to minimize the seizures. Luckily, in between these episodes, even though before we fully diagnosed and got her on this game plan of medication, they were becoming very frequent. in between all this, she's as joyous as she kind of always was. In those moments, she doesn't look like she's in pain. She just looks disoriented. But it was touch and go, because, you really feel a sense of responsibility. At least I do, and I'm sure you do too, but, to animals and people in general. And when you just can't help them, as I said, it's not like she can speak to me. It's not like we can converse of like, hey, what do you want to do here? You're kind of left making the decision on their behalf. It's a tough thing, and then there's also the finances associated with that. So it's a lot. It's a lot, and I know I'm not the only one to ever deal with this stuff, but that's why, I do the lessons that I do, because this stuff comes at us and hits us, and I think, I don't know, I get the sense that a lot of people in this world really do feel more and more isolated. I think a lot of us want to help each other, but we're all kind of just dealing with our own shit as best as we can. And so it becomes difficult to do that. And, we do in the ways that we can. But sometimes, it doesn't always feel like enough. Like, I know there's friends that hit me up about certain things, and, I try to be there for them in the ways that I can. But it's just, I don't know, it's just tough. And I've really, as we start to close this year out, this year really has been one of the greatest years of my life. But it's also been just incredibly full of losses. Some minor, that, hurt in the moment, but don't, in the grand scheme of things, don't amount to much. And then, others big, certainly losing my grandfather, that was a big one. The stuff with Chloe, and just other stuff in general. It's tough, and the world doesn't always give you the time that you need to be able to deal with all this stuff, I'm very thankful that all these opportunities are coming. Again, if it was up to me, I'd choose a different time period. But, what are you going to do? You got to roll up your sleeves and do all of it. And yes, there's a prioritization to it, and there's a balance, and you do the best you can. You make these choices, and certainly the choices for me, I make my choices, and a lot of times, that sacrifices a lot of social stuff for me, and things of that nature or whatever. But for me, my social stuff comes from creating this stuff and being able to collaborate and have fun, right? So, it doesn't sound very cheerful, but it is. I don't know how to explain it fully, but, we all do get to make choices in life. The tough part is, none of these opportunities, yield me money at the moment. Everything that I've done creatively, I've had to underwrite through other means, whether it be the coaching stuff, whether it be working on side projects for other people, all that stuff. So, I think that's something that we as artists can relate to, for sure. Time and money certainly tend to be two of the things that we keep missing and would help. And in that way, if I do bring any value to you, and it doesn't put a financial strain on you, there's my movies, my books, all of this is linked to down below, merchandise, or if you want to do a coaching session, that is available to you, or I've updated my Patreon page at patreon.com/PhilSvitek. So there's only one tier. It's $10 a month. And, for me, it really is about creating a community, interacting with people that are part of it, and bring as much value on a more intimate level beyond this, right? I think, episodes like this and the other ones that I put out are great because they set sort of a baseline, and a foundation. But then we can get into the specifics of, what people are facing through my Patreon page. And that's why I really just wanted to keep it simple and just, $10, one tier, and that's it. So that is an option, again, if it doesn't put a financial strain on you. So that's kind of, creatively what's been going on. I do want to share other thoughts that I think are worthwhile to consider. And the first one is the power of identity, right? I remember about maybe 2 years ago at this point, working with my therapist on like attachments, right? And there being levels of attachment, and 5 being like, you're just extremely attached, like it's, And when I say identity, right, it can be things like, being a vegan is a form of identity. Your political affiliation is a form of identity. Being a sports fan, and your sports team being an identity. The city you live in or grew up in, all this stuff, right? And like all things, it's not in and of itself a negative. It's the level of attachment that you have towards it. So, certainly let's take something like soccer hooligans, that if their team loses, they can cause violence. Even when they sometimes win, they can cause violence towards others by the sheer nature of it, because then they otherize those not them. And sometimes there's even infighting, so it just gets crazy. And I think that's something we have to kind of really stop and reflect upon, like, what do we identify with, and is it to a healthy level or not? And how do we even define what that is? For me, I'm a big Real Madrid fan, which is a soccer team, if you're not familiar. And I enjoy watching them play. And oftentimes, they're a team that can be very frustrating because, they usually pull out victories, but they leave it for like last minute and so forth. And not always, sometimes they do lose. And so when you watch a game, it's very exhilarating. But I always try to, go into the game and I'm rooting for them. And it's a roller coaster of highs and lows. But then afterwards, win or lose, know that I'm not on the team. I don't get paid to play, right? So in that sense, it's like, it doesn't affect my life ultimately, one way or the other. So, it's just about the enjoyment in the moment and then letting it go. Now, some might even argue that that might be a little bit unhealthy because in the moments it has so many highs and so many lows, but, it's what creates that enjoyment for me, but I can detract myself from it afterwards. So, just something to consider for your own life is, what are you attached to as an identity, and how does it ultimately affect your life? Does it affect your life in a positive or negative way? To what level? I think that's really worthwhile to consider. Speaking of soccer, the other thing that was interesting to consider is choices going into the World Cup. The roster of players selected by each coach from each nation. We can look to the USA, right? Ricardo Pepi. A lot of people are hugely upset that he was not selected. And rightly, in my mind, rightly so, because this is a guy that quite single-handedly scored the goals needed to get them to the World Cup. And you don't reward the dude by going. England made similar choices where there's this guy named Ivan Tony, I believe. If I'm mispronouncing his name, I apologize. But basically, major star, like third goal scorer in the English Premier League at the moment, and was snubbed. And of course, coaches could make the choices that they want. Sometimes it's about particular systems, sometimes it's about chemistry and things of that nature. But it is interesting to me how sometimes loyalty above all else goes into it versus anything else. And again, it just not that like you or I are coaches picking World Cup rosters, but just understanding why we select the people that we work with or friends, anything in that deals with kind of choices of, personnel, I think offers a good examination of why we choose those people, and really examining that. Because certainly you look at some of the, at least for me, I look at some of the choices of these World Cup rosters and I'm like, wow, you are not trying to win, are you? So just interesting to me. And I could very well be proven wrong. I'm not in it day to day. I'm just very much an outside critic throwing sort of stones at it. But yeah, that's why I try to reflect it back to me of like, what's the greater lesson here, ultimately. Speaking of lessons, it's been interesting. Last weekend, I watched the Titans versus Kansas City in football, NFL, right? And the Kansas City kicker missed twice. Once on an extra point, once on a field goal. And I did a video on this because I watched it and I could tell before he even took both kicks that he was going to miss. Just by his body language, his stance, his approach, technique, all that, right? And I posted it on social media, and it's been interesting to see the responses from fans of football. Very much essentially hating on me for having this take of essentially, I don't understand why a kicker would kick this way. Like, it sets him up. It makes it, it's not to say that he will miss, but it certainly sets him up to, miss more. He's increasing his chances of missing rather than making it. And even when he makes it, he's making his life more difficult. So, that's essentially the crux of my argument. And, people are calling me dumb, stupid, I don't know what I'm talking about. This is how all players kick and so forth. And it's been interesting to observe that, again, that sort of, some of it deals with identity because you have this outsider all of a sudden, who doesn't identify as a, straight football fan. Because for me, I'm just more of a casual observer, I'll watch like the Super Bowl and maybe a couple games here and there if I'm lucky over the course of the season, right? And so I think they could kind of sense that. And so there's this vitriol associated with it. But in my mind, it's like, okay, number one, everything that I like, they say, well, they all do it this way. And I'm like, okay, but he missed, right? So, the result, it doesn't work, right? It didn't, the same technique that he used to kick, he missed because of it. So, he can continue doing it, but he's gonna miss. And so it's interesting to see people hold on to something that fails. Why would you hold it? Like, if it was working, fine. But why would you hold on to something that fails? And, the idea that sports, or we can even, the football is stagnant and that, like, this is the way it's always been. No, sports evolve. In fact, a couple times I linked to articles about like the evolution of football in the last decade. It's like, of course, Every sport evolves, but, football definitely evolves. And so why not, create new ways of kicking, because that was a major argument of well, don't you think if they knew better, they would do it better, blah, blah, they get paid millions. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, I think there's a better way, and people should be thinking about it. And they were like, well, would you say the same thing if a receiver didn't catch it twice or a quarterback missed through it twice? And I'd be like, well, if there's a pattern to it, the reason I can talk about the kicking aspect is because I'm a soccer player. I understand the fundamentals of kicking a ball, and the science behind all that. I'm not good at throwing or receiving, stuff like that. And so no, I wouldn't be able to, give notes on that. But someone much more versed than me, if they notice patterns of why a quarterback, if they're throwing and twice in a row they mess it up, if there's a pattern to it, then yes, I would hope that they would address it. If I was the coach, I would certainly want that. So there's that aspect, patterns, looking for patterns. The other aspect is this expert fallacy. Oftentimes we think just because, someone is an expert that they don't know, or that they always know. And they call it an expert fallacy because when you think you're always right, then it blindsides you. And now, mind you, these are all people online, so it's not like they're experts to begin with. They're just kind of, armchair quarterbacks, if you will. Excuse me. But all the same, they certainly think they're experts. But because of that, there's that inherent blindness. And many times, in whatever field you want to talk about, right? Airlines were a big benefactor of this. When outsiders enter that arena, because they don't know the established rules or whatever, they bring something new to the table and they revolutionize that industry, if you will. So, oftentimes it is the non-experts that bring innovation to the thing. And so, listen, I'm not saying I'm correct and I'm not the person that's going to revolutionize football and how kickers kick. But I'm just saying in general that, to not discredit someone who's an outsider asking seemingly dumb questions or raising up seemingly stupid ideas, because it can lead to something quite beautiful. One of my favorite stories, or methodologies rather, is there's a Brazilian coffee maker, and it was a family-owned business. And when the son finally took over, he implemented the 3 whys. So why? And this was to essentially deconstruct everything in the business and figure out if it was worthwhile to keep or not. And they did it with everything. They needed a hierarchy of titles. Why? Well, so people know their roles. Why? And they would literally go through this. And if it didn't stand through all 3 levels of why, they would get rid of it because it served no purpose. Right? They got to a point, they're like, listen, make up your own title. If being the Western Hemisphere coffee, sales director was great and it allowed you to sell, coffee to the clients that you needed to, whatever, go for it. Outfits and uniforms and stuff like that for, employees, they got rid of it because it wasn't serving them ultimately any purpose, right? So I just love that, the 3 whys. And so I can certainly kind of think of, football kicking and, the technique that's currently used, quote unquote, and just running it through the why and seeing, how it fails or doesn't fail. So yeah, that's been kind of interesting to ponder. One last thing I'll leave you on that has been kind of in my mind, and I think sums a lot of this up, is those who react to chaos best win. It's a powerful one, isn't it? been thinking a lot about that one. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to tune in. As always, I appreciate it. If you have any questions or thoughts of your own, please share them down below in the comments section or hit me up on social media at Svitek. Would love to discuss with you. As I said, also linked to down below are the various movies, books, coaching sessions, Patreon, all that stuff is linked for your benefit there if you want to check that out. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.